Hey there, music fans. Today I'd like to feature something by Walter Rossi, one of my favorite solo albums by that guitar player. Walter was from Italy, but he came over to Canada as a youngster and grew up in Montreal. In my opinion, Walter should be held in the same high regard as other Canadian icons such as Randy Bachman, Rick Emmett, Dominic Triano, and the like. Really big back east. I grew up in Toronto, and everywhere east of Toronto, everybody had heard of Walter Rossi and his band Charlie, but when I moved out west to Calgary, late 70s, nobody had heard of him. It was really odd. So I can remember having a lot of fun introducing people to Walter's music back at that time out here in Calgary. This would be his third album, 6 Strings, 9 Lives. But first I'll give you a quick background history from what I remember. Walter, as I mentioned, kind of grew up in Montreal. He was called down to the U.S. by Wilson Pickett and played with Wilson's band, recording and touring for at least a couple of years during the mid to late 60s. And during that point in time, he must have hooked up with Jimi Hendrix. Jimmy was with Curtis Knight and all that kind of thing. So they must have played gigs, because I've read somewhere that Walter and Jimmy had jammed. Walter's style, heavily influenced by Jimmy's, I think. But you know what? They might have both picked up things from each other, kind of cutting their teeth at around the same time as young men playing the circuit in the mid-60s. Walter, after leaving Wilson Pickett's band, he formed a psychedelic band back in Canada called The Influence, and they opened for The Doors, Iron Butterfly, Steppenwolf, and those types of bands at that time. Right around that time, or just after that time, Jimi Hendrix Band of Gypsys drummer Buddy Miles released a solo album called Them Changes. Now Walter played all over that LP. He can be found on that album credited as Walter Rossolundo, but that is Walter Rossi. So yeah, all that guitar happening on that album was from Walter. After that, Walter came back up to Canada, to Montreal, and formed the heavy rock, hard rock power trio known as Charlie. Drawing on that same Jimi Hendrix kind of lead guitar sort of thing, bass, drums, just a simple three-piece, but they were really good. Kind of a cross between what Hendrix was doing and maybe, let's say, Captain Beyond or something. Really highly recommended. Now Charlie, not to be confused with this Charlie, I thought I would just pull this out. This is a totally different band, and a different spelling, I might add. The Charlie that I'm referring to is, here's their self-titled Canadian LP. This is the original pressing on RCA. On the Dynaflex series, 1972, with the textured cover. And this is a really nice copy. So there's that. That's Charlie. And note the spelling. Okay? So in the US, the LP was reissued in 1976 on the Mind Dust label. And I actually have a nice sealed copy of this too that's unopened. So a lot of videos you see on YouTube by Charlie, they feature this. I think the CD was reissued using the US cover, which I kind of think is pretty cool. It's kind of a neat caricature kind of thing going on there. And this is actually a pretty good pressing. Anybody familiar with RCA, the one that I just showed you, knows that they were infamous for just having thin pressings, especially that Dynaflex series. Got a couple Walter Rossi solo albums here, his first album here, which is really good. All of his stuff is great. And there's Walter on the back with his Gibson. And this was Walter's third solo album, released in 1980. And after this, I never really cared much for him. I did catch him live in the early 80s. He still put on a great live show, but I just wasn't a fan too much of his music after this album. I love that guitar with that Bigsby tremolo arm. And this has got the song Sniffin' the Breeze, great song. My wife actually did an upload on YouTube using footage from Steve McQueen's Bullet paired with that song, Sniffin' the Breeze. So that's his third album. Back to the second album, Walter Rossi, 6 Strings, 9 Lives. Really cool thing happening here with this gimmick cover. I'm a big fan of these things, if I can get it open without wrecking it. So this is almost full scale. There's Walter's Gibson with that Bigsby tremolo arm. And you can actually cut this out. There's perforation marks all the way around this. And here's the back, Walter's initials on the back of the headstock, down the neck, and you can actually see the perforations. So if I wanted to, I could have cut this out and hung it on my wall or stood it up or whatever. There's like even a little cardboard thing so it can stand. I have two other copies of this. One is still sealed. One is open, but I really never take it out. This is a player copy, which plays very clean. I might open the other sealed one like a fine bottle of wine someday, but we'll wear this puppy out first. So that's that. So this is the inner sleeve. A lot of money went into packaging. Like, this is all heavy cardboard. So this guy slid inside here. And I've just got kind of like a little poly thing happening there. So on the back you got the credits and lyrics. So we'll give it a spin. Just got to switch hands here. I did give it a dusting. Okay. Power on. So this is the opening cut on side 2, Malagueña Revisited. Very cool introduction. But this album was really Latin inspired, like the Al Di Meola kind of thing Al was doing around this time. And you'll hear that in a sec. I like this part. always liked that Hammond, that organ. I wonder who plays on this. John McDonald on keyboards. Drummer is Jimmy Ayoub. Excuse me. You might recognize that name from Frank Marino, Mahogany Rush. So he's drumming here. So yeah, that's really cool. Jimmy Ayoub. I know that name from Frank Marino, Mahogany Rush, another well-known Canadian Montreal band. So these guys must have all kind of worked together in that same Montreal clique and knew each other, because I see Jimmy's name up here as well. So what I'm going to do now is play you track 1, off side 1, Strada del Sol, another Latin-inspired piece. Not very representative of what you'd find on this album as a whole. There are 2 or 3 Latin-inspired grooves here, but so we'll drop the tone arm down and give this a listen. Very jazz fusion-y, this one. Much different than his stuff with Charlie. Charlie was basically balls to the wall, just hard rock. This is really nice, really well recorded too. And I actually have his albums on CD as well. I'll show you the reissues that I have here. Now, they were all reissued on Unidisc out of Montreal. Excellent label, but their transfers are perfect. Right up there with, I don't know if you're familiar with Repertoire, the German label famous for reissuing a lot of more obscure things. This Unidisc label was great, and they reissued stuff by Canadian bands like Foot and Cold Water, Flood, Walter Rossi, Moxie. All of Moxie's albums were reissued on that. But I think out of all Walter's solo stuff, out of these 3, this would definitely be my favorite. Yeah, by far. So the record might be hard to find, depending on where you live, on vinyl, but the CDs, I think, are still available. But I did hear somewhere that Unidisc closed their doors. But you never know. Somebody might have them on Amazon. I just love this. I can feel the whole room shaking, the house shaking. But I'm quite sure that's not being conveyed through the shitty microphone on this camera. I love the guitar. So much different for Walter, coming from the school of blues and hard rock to suddenly jump over to the jazz fusion thing. He did it quite well, I think. So as I mentioned, I do have 2 or 3 copies of this album. It looks like my player copy. It does have some slight warpage, but it seems to be tracking really nicely. Drums, nice. Such a perfect ending. Vibraphone. I'll play into the next song a little bit. It's an awesome, sort of a slower tempo. Soldiers in the Night. This is a really cool song. But then I might fade out midway.
Get your earphones and turn the light. Look at the morning, stars are bright. If it turns out to be a rainy day, you always have this song to play. So many tears I have shed for a song before going to bed. The song never seems to find an end. I play it till my eyes are red. It makes me think of a life and all the shadows in the virtual light. Being insecure about what there was, lifted up to the world in the sun.
Yeah, it's such a cool song, this one.
Dreams are always what they see, and my life is but a dream. Dreams are always what they see.
Very epic sounding. Oh, that bass drum. There's some classical guitar. Yeah, the lyrics are very deep. This brings back memories when I was, a little younger, back in the 70s, partying, playing this album. Sitting back in a daze, listening intently to the lyrics, identifying with them, and then opening another beer. Yeah. Is that a theremin or a voice? Must be voice. Yeah. Oh, that's Nanette Workman. Another famous Canadian. Up here anyways. He had one heck of a set of pipes, that one. At least I think that would be Nanette. Yeah. Background vocals. Special vocal effects, Nanette Workman. And Billy Workman was her brother.